Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. We all have the hindsight is 2020 vision. And for us patients, the majority of us can look back at our own diagnostic journey and identify actions we perhaps should have done something differently. And while we can't go back in time, nor can we ignore the significant advancements in amyloidosis, whether that be our knowledge of the disease, awareness, and the treatments, we can certainly offer insights that might help others so that they have an easier diagnostic journey. In this episode, I'll chat with Jerry about his thoughts on what he'd do differently looking back today. Welcome, Jerry. I'm delighted to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, Mackenzie. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So, for us patients that have gone through this diagnostic journey and we've fortunately ultimately arrived at a correct diagnosis and we have that story. And thanks to the hindsight, we can certainly look back on our journey and identify certain things where perhaps we should have done something differently. And against a backdrop of astounding advancements in the knowledge and the treatment of amyloidosis over the last handful of years, the diagnostic journey for new patients may certainly be different now. So let's start by talking about your journey and what are some of the ideas on what you do different today that might be helpful to other patients.
No, sounds great. In my case, with hindsight and what I know today about the disease, I started having symptoms probably 7 years before my diagnosis came. And I saw several general practitioners as well as a specialist, a cardiologist. And I got a misdiagnosis initially as of just AFib, and they thought it was related to CPAP, which CPAP use or sleep apnea. So I had a misdiagnosis. And for me, that resulted in a protracted time to a proper diagnosis. From the misdiagnosis to when I knew I had the disease was about, well, initially, I think it was about 2 years, give or take, about two and a half, actually. So it delayed the treatment of in proper care for amyloidosis as we treated AFib only, and I took a lot of medication that
Mm.
were not effective. So in my case, I feel ultimately I'm responsible because I stayed with a cardiologist for over 2 years, and I wasn't getting anywhere. I was getting worse
Mm.
symptomatically. So it didn't make a lot of sense. So I'd say don't ignore evolving changes that we see in our body. And as I progress with the AFib and I'm feeling worse, make sure that doctor knows it. And if he doesn't take action, then make sure I look at other options. Be an advocate for yourself. Take responsibility for your care because you're the only one that is going to ultimately care the most. So take responsibility for that and do change positions if you're going nowhere. No sense in just continuing on it with a treatment that's not effective. And in the case of amyloidosis, giving the disease an opportunity to progress.
Yeah, those are some excellent points, and I'd love to go through them one at a time and elaborate on each of them. So to your first point, not ignoring evolving changes in your body and those emerging symptoms you have.
hmm the early symptoms I have now that I know more about the disease, they just seemed like odd things to me at the time. Like I had loss of hair, like on my calves, just on both legs. And
Mhm.
I went to, and there was a little bit of numbness and tingling there. And I would ask the doctor about it when I'd have a visit. And they essentially said, well, you wear socks and you wear kind of tall socks when you work, and then you wear tube socks when you exercise. So it's probably just wearing the hair off. And maybe the numbness, maybe it is numb, maybe it's kind of in your head kind of thing.
Mhm.
So they essentially dismissed it. And then the next symptoms I had that were very real were carpal tunnel, which was about 7 years before I got the diagnosis. and I
Mm.
had severe carpal tunnel in both hands, and I had surgery done on both hands, which did correct it for a number of years. I think I had relief for probably 5 years after the surgery. And the next thing for me after the carpal tunnel, I just started getting increasing fatigue and then a diagnosis with the AFib, which came suddenly. And then again, the whole thing is we tend to rationalize things as well. The increased fatigue, you kind of write off to age,
Mm.
because by then I think I was probably around 60 years old, 61, and you don't know how the aging process works because we haven't been through it, and you just kind of figure, well, I'm slowing down.
Mm.
Um, Today I would press the first cardiologist to do additional testing and to go for a biopsy of my heart, and then that would have indicated amyloidosis, and then I could have started treatment.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'd say don't discount the fatigue. See the cardiologist. See a second one if you need to. If after 6 months you're not seeing improvements, get that second opinion. Because I wasted a good year and a half with a physician that was misdiagnosing me and wasn't really taking any additional tests or thinking beyond what he already thought my issue was. So don't rationalize the symptoms and do take action, and don't assume it's just your age. It could be something else.
Yeah, you make a great point about rationalizing these things. And a lot of the times we have these very vague, benign seeming symptoms, the
Mm-hmm.
fatigue and a lot of the things that can naturally come with the aging process. And, it's important, like you said, you know your body better than anyone else. So if it doesn't seem natural, if there's just kind of that nagging gut feeling that you have, bring that up and advocate for yourself because while it may seem benign and it may seem like, "Oh, I'm just slowing down or I'm just getting older," it truly could be the sign of a very significant life-altering disease, so I'm really glad you make that point.
Yes, it's so true. And in my first, my general practitioner that I had for probably 15 years, every time I went, all he would focus on was my weight, telling me I'm overweight, and then in other issues like that. He would never actually get down to and dig deeper on the issues that I was presenting to him.
Yeah, and like you said at the beginning, and we'll touch on this again later, y the fact that as a patient, you should never feel bad or you should never feel guilty about seeking a second opinion.
Right.
Um, but before we get to that, I wanna touch on your second point, and that is being an advocate for yourself and taking responsibility for your own health.
Right. Today, I would take responsibility for my life, and I'd bring symptoms to the physician's attention and not keep them to myself. If I think I wouldn't do the rationalization piece that says I'm tired, I'm
Mm.
getting older, or this is probably normal, or let them, like on the case of like the hair coming off on my leg, that didn't seem normal. Not everyone I know loses the hair on their
Mm.
calves, even though they wear socks. So don't let nonsensical responses kind of get in your head and accept them. Basically, you got to dig a little bit deeper. Push back with the physician when that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd say to others, own your lifestyle and behaviors. Don't let shame and embarrassment stop you from actually bringing up what's going on with you physically. Some topics can be difficult to discuss, but you have to be honest with physicians about lifestyle and all that, and own that part of your life. They can't help you if they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're definitely not mind readers.
right.
And so, like you said, if you don't offer something up, they're not gonna know. They're not gonna know to ask about it or to try to dig deeper into that area. So, it is hard and it's easiest for us to say, not to let the shame and embarrassment stop you, but it really is true, right? These people do this for a living and they want to help you, right? At the root of all their training and their education was a desire to help patients. So, whatever it is that's bothering you, it's important to bring that up.
No, I totally agree. It's like a smoker that doesn't admit they smoke. It's,
Yeah.
it's just not really not best for you in the long case, in the long
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
But
And then your last point, I think this is one that's really important and we've talked about it before, but changing positions when you feel like you're in a rut, when you're not making any progress, or
Right.
you're feeling unheard. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the most important thing in my journey that I did is I'd had the same cardiologist for about 2 years. And then I was in to get what they call an aversion because my heart was in AFib again. I kept going through cycles of being in AFib and then being out of it, and it kept getting more frequent. And so I was in there fairly frequently for the aversion where they zap your heart to bring it back into rhythm. I think this was probably the fifth or sixth time. And I
Mm.
was talking to one of the nurses, one of the prep nurses, and he said, "You know what? You're here a lot for the same procedure. I think you should talk to a doctor about getting an ablation." And I talked to him about who he recommended and who they liked. And they gave me a recommendation of Dr. Gleason, that she does a lot of ablations. So I contacted her. We discussed doing that to see if that would stop the AFib. And we tried a couple times to do the ablations. And then I switched to her as a cardiologist because I was more confident. And
Mhm.
in her case, she just kept digging and digging after the second ablation didn't help me. And she found she had me take additional tests, which actually is what determined that I had amyloidosis. And then additional testing to verify that it's the genetic version. So she took me down that path of actually getting the proper diagnosis. If I hadn't switched doctors, I think there's a high likelihood I would have died of heart failure at the end of probably 2020 or early 2021.
It's just shocking, and I think it's something that is almost all too common
Hmm.
for patients. And, I can't say that I had quite the severity of symptoms, but I too went through a very similar thing as with you. I had throat involvement, and
Hmm.
I went to my first ENT specialist, and she said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just allergies. Here's some Zyrtec." And when I asked her, I said, "Can we biopsy this? I'm concerned about it." And she said, "That's not something we can do in the office." And not knowing much about this stuff, right? I, like many people, said, "Okay, let's try your way and see how things go." But, like you, after a period of time, over a year went by and it kept getting larger, and I just had had enough. I was tired of waiting, and I went for a second opinion. And
Right.
his reaction was, "You know what? I've never seen anything like this. Let's biopsy it right here, right now in the office. We're not waiting." And exactly like you were saying, had I not made the decision to seek a second opinion, who knows what life would look like and what the state of my disease would be
Right.
had I not just said, "You know what? I'm gonna make a change." And, it wasn't easy to decision, and it takes time to really mull that over and pull the trigger, so to speak, on making a change. But your case as well, a lot of the times it ends up being the best decision you can make for yourself as a patient. So I'm really glad you shared your story, and I just couldn't agree more with you about taking responsibility. And if you don't feel like your care is going in a direction you're happy with, change. It's totally within your right, and it's something you should be doing. So I want to thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
So in closing, I would want to just offer you an opportunity to offer up any thoughts or messages that you have for patients who may be early in their diagnostic journey, and kind of with hindsight, so to speak, right? What tips you can offer them.
No, great. I would say, in short, it's your life. So take responsibility for your own health care. If it's not right, then keep digging. In my case, if I hadn't switched cardiologists, I probably would not have had an opportunity to get a heart transplant and extend my life. So it's absolutely critical with this disease that you catch it as soon as you possibly can because we're largely stuck with whatever symptoms we have when we're diagnosed.
Yeah.
So keep searching. If you aren't satisfied with the progress or the answers, find someone that will work with you and that will take that extra step and get you the diagnosis to get you on treatment.
Well, thank you, Jerry, so much for our discussion today. I really appreciate you having you on, and sharing such valuable knowledge for our audience.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mackenzie. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And for our listeners, if you're still searching for answers or yet to receive a diagnosis, you may find a lot of these thoughts really helpful. And we want to wish you well in your journey ahead. And thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's Mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.